Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, just for recording, please mute yourself though. I hear a lot of echo. Can you mute yourself?
Oh.
Hello? Okay, thank you. Just for recording, it's a SIG Node meeting. It's October 20th. Hello, everybody. With pull requests, we have many weeks when we have more pull requests created than merged. Luckily for us, some of them were closed. This week, we have very few closed ones and only 2 merged. Most of the closed ones were closed by author, so maybe created by mistake or duplicated. And we have a lot of pull requests created. So I think we need to double down on reviewing pull requests. Unfortunately, I didn't have much time last week. I was catching up after being sick for a week. So hopefully this week I will spend more time reviewing, but I will encourage everybody else to also review. And more we have LGTM pull requests, easier it will be to approve and move it forward. So yeah, this is unfortunate update that we jumped very high this week. Hopefully we can clean up by in next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Sergey. I just wanted to note, I've spent the last like hour and a half going through my own personal backlog of things pending approval. So I don't know when you collected these stats, but I think we should look better in the next hour after that queue goes through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. I also did that the last couple of weeks also in the Tuesday morning, but also, yeah, the update have the what Sergey report have the snapshot, giving snapshot time and may not reflect the current status. Thank you, Sergey. Let's move to the first topic, user namespace. I think you have that to the 10.
Hello. So yes, I don't have that much to say about this topic today. I only want to point out that we opened a new PR with the full proposal for this work, as I presented this something like 1 month ago. So yes, I'm looking for reviewers of this. This will be great. If there are any comments and you give us then, I will be happy to answer any questions you have about that.
So just to add more context, like so folks from Red Hat have been reviewing it, and we think it's in a good place now. There are a couple of open questions there. So if folks want to take a look and chime in.
Okay, and then just from a prioritization standpoint, this is what we would tackle for 121 at the earliest, right?
Yeah, this did not make the KEP deadline. So meanwhile, I guess we can have branches to validate.
Was there anything that came out of this discussion that made us concerned on the CRI transitions?
No, can't really think of anything. It's all additive, so it should be fine. We can't hear you, Don.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you that. What's the potential concern?
Your mic has like a squeaking noise, Dawn, that's making it really hard to hear you, but it sounds like a bird chirping. It's the closest thing I can.
So how about this way? Today I shut up and Derek, please go learn the rest of the agenda. Is that okay?
What I heard was your mic isn't working great, and I will work through the agenda for you. Okay. So I think as the next step on this particular item, we need to just kind of assign primary approvers. I last tried to get my way through the user namespace effort first phase. I'm happy to do it again. And so if there's anybody else on the metadata for this that wants to volunteer to help review, it'd be appreciated. I see, Mrinal, you were listed.
Yeah,
maybe we can use this as an opportunity to champion some new folks as well. So for now, I'm happy to mark myself as an approver, but maybe if we can get some additional reviewers outside of maybe Red Hat and Kinvolk, that would be appreciated.
I can take a look at it as well, Kevin from NVIDIA. We have an internal implementation of user namespaces we use. So if nothing else, I can add some flavor to what we do.
Awesome, Kevin. So let's go with that as a plan. So if we can add Kevin as an additional reviewer, and then I'll handle approval. And anything else we want to touch on this other than a request to review in the next few weeks?
No, from my side, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Moving on then. Is Jeremy here to talk through the node problem detector?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Edwards. And so I'm from SIG Windows, and I created a proposal for node problem detector to run on Windows. So this is one of the feature gaps in Windows where basically on Linux, you have this tool that runs and it analyzes the host OS and finds problems, that can come from that host OS, these various issues and so on. And so I looked at the code and basically what it does in Linux and kind of created a proposal to adapt it to Windows with a bunch of Windows isms, like what happens if like Windows Defender finds something like the host is compromised or something like that. Maybe we could bubble that up to the Kubernetes control plane so that it can respond. There is a question, any potential problem detector plugins we can plan to include for the first version. Those are listed as in the document itself. So there's a bunch of problems, a lot there. It's somewhat exhaustive in the problems that we can look for, but I wanted to put it up to the community to see which ones are actually ones that are worthwhile to do and ones that are not. So there is a list of options there that we can look at, but I would expect probably around like a third of this list would get implemented, and maybe like 1 or 2 would get released at when it actually goes out initially, and we could build upon that, of course. But the document goes into details of like, okay, how do we actually deploy this? And it also discusses things like the limitations of Windows, like there's a lack of privileged container support, so things like daemon sets won't work for this quite yet. That's coming in Kubernetes 120, but potentially, and it may get delayed in Windows, but NPD actually has, it does have a mode where it can run in systemd, so we would have a similar mode that would run in Windows services, and so on. And so it goes into details of how to do all that. So yeah, I'm basically just looking for community feedback before we actually go ahead and start implementing it. And also the doc links have been added to the Slack channels for Node Problem Detector and SIG Node.
Thanks, Jeremy. So I think my first thought on this, and Don, I wish your mic was working as well, is that maybe we could use this as a good opportunity to kind of assess the health of the NPD subproject itself, to make sure that the current listed owners and contributors are still active in providing feedback, and if we need to supplement it. And then I'd love to figure out, Jeremy, if this is an area that you could help out with, given new interest. I don't know, I'm thinking of names that we typically had leaned on in the past on for this component area was like Lantau. I don't think he's here today. so that's the first kind of question that came to mind is like, with new interest, can we expand or reinvigorate health in the sub-project itself? So my first thought is maybe Dawn, you and I can work together to get maybe a readout on the current state of MPD from the primary sub-project owners, and then align this use case with like as an action item out of that readout. Is that fair, Jeremy?
I mean, that sounds fine to me. I looked at it. It looks like the project hadn't been updated in a while. There's been, I think, a steady stream of PRs and stuff, but it's not as active, obviously, as like Kubernetes or anything in that order. But
yeah, and I was thinking about this because one of the PRs I was looking at earlier was just us marking certain tests serial that are presently flaky, and I think Sergey, you had comments on, hey, you know, why do we need to do that type of thing? So I think in general, like for call to action here, I will happily review this. I'm sure Dawn will review this, and then maybe we can queue up a discussion on the overall health of MPD to see if we need to supplement it. From a timeline perspective, did you have a release timeline in mind?
I mean, we have, sorry, we have, we don't have a solid timeline for this particular component yet. Basically, this proposal has been published early. Sorry. This proposal is published out early, just in the anticipation that we would have, you know, some review time and stuff like that. So we're trying to get ahead of the ball. This proposal has been circulated with Microsoft as well. So I'm hoping that basically, hopefully around like the end of this quarter, we would have like some clarity of like what needs to be done here, and then, you know, hopefully maybe in Q1 the run will open so that we can start executing that.
Okay, and then my only other thought is we have some folks at Red Hat that are looking at Windows as well, so I'll rally them to help also look at this proposal. But was this presented within SIG Windows itself?
Yes, this proposal was presented in SIG Windows a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, awesome. Then maybe they're already aware. Yeah, and as a PSA, I mean, I have 3 daughters, so at any moment my daughter might come in and enjoy a SIG Node call. So it's happy to hear we're recruiting of all ages. So let's we'll review the doc and we'll follow up on the doc. But thanks, Jeremy, for bringing this forward. With that, if there's no other comments on this, we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, hi, Chris here. This is just an update regarding the topology manager scope and memory manager. And maybe there will be one question at the end. So topology manager scope is now currently under the review by Kevin. And many thanks for the great review. Also, thanks for the review for Sergey and Francesco. Memory manager, which KEP was merged recently, there's also opened the PR and the documentation PR update. And any reviewer is welcome here because this change is a little big. So if you are willing to review, feel free to go. And my question is, because we are wondering how to implement the handling of reusing memory from init containers by app containers, the same as it is in the CPU manager. And we have some initial ideas, and we thought that maybe it would be good to reflect that in the KEP. So my question is, should we open a PR for the KEP and it can be merged anytime, or it may be stopped by some enhancement freeze or beta release? This is just like an update to the KEP.
Yeah, so I think there's, from my perspective, no issue to maybe discuss a complicating edge case that was encountered during an implementation, like on the existing KEP, and I don't think that that should be a problem with respect to release planning. It's just a good forum to have the discussion, and so I have no issue with that. The particular situation you're describing is just one of those situations that I guess we may have had some oversight on when thinking through it. Like, I'm also just thinking about where particular containers could be writing to get this accounted right. So like in a container that writes to an empty dir, will have its memory charge transferred to the pod, but never picked up by the app, but it still needs to be considered consumed. And so we'll just have to work through some of those scenarios, but yeah, please supplement the existing doc with that. You had a lot of great diagrams when I was reviewing it earlier.
Yeah, great. So in the PR, we can also mention all the edge cases that may need to be addressed.
Maybe my ask, I know when we did the KEP, there were existing branches that had this work in progress. Was there anything about the two PRs you enumerated that deviate from the original KEP that you want to give special attention to? Or did everything go smooth, I guess, as I'm curious.
Only those edge cases, I think, right now.
Okay.
Are the problem.
And Kevin, you helped a lot in reviewing the KEP. Have you had a chance to look at either of these two PRs either?
I looked at them early on when I was doing the review because at the time the KEP was harder to follow than to just kind of glance through the code and see how things were implemented. And then we kind of, worked together to get the KEP in shape where it matched what was in the code, but I haven't done a proper formal review of the code at all yet. It was more just glancing through it to see what was being done.
Okay. So I see you're an assignee on at least one of them, Kevin. I'm wondering, given how intimately related, if you wouldn't mind at least taking a pass at 95479. And personally, I feel like this is a very complicated subject area, so maybe the two of us can take a pass, and if it makes sense to both of us, that feels better than just putting the burden on an individual approver.
Sure, I think that makes sense. I'm in California right now instead of Europe, so it might help with if we needed to do any live discussions in the afternoon or something for the next 2 weeks. Also, I wanted to just comment on the topology manager scope PR. I've done a few passes reviewing the code there. The only pieces I have left are to look a little bit deeper into the changes in the device manager and then some of the details and all of the tests they've added. But at least the scaffolding code and the changes to the CPU manager and the topology manager itself are in pretty good shape at this point. So I'm hoping to wrap up those last two things by the end of this week. And I'll be able to approve from the container manager down, but we'll need someone else to come in and approve all of the flag changes and all of that stuff. So just to make sure you're aware of that.
Okay. So,
great, thanks.
So I just made sure they're both labeled with the milestone appropriately, so they'll get, for any of us that are filtering our Kubernetes, we can make sure they're not lost per our goals. But thanks, Kevin, for the help on this, and we'll try
no
to
problem.
Unblock the review. Are there any other items you want to raise on this? Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next topic.
That's all. Many thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so Francesco, are you here to talk?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually a very simple question about how to move forward. So we have two PRs at the moment implementing the pod resources concrete APIs, which KEP was recently merged, and just wondering how you folks prefer to have them, meaning reason I'm asking because one is the one which is adding new fields to the existing API is self-contained, nice, ready for review. So and the other is a bit more complex because, for example, I'm adding and more end-to-end tests, and the watch implementation is still getting in shape. But the basic question is okay to keep them separated? You prefer to have one cumulative? Just open question.
Yeah, so I think what we should do is also figure out who wants to take over the review. So I know Renaud helped a lot in the KEP review as well. I don't know if he's on the call today. Maybe what I would say is, can we reach out to Renaud or over Slack to see if he has a preference? It'd be great if he would be willing to assist this part.
Yep, I'll raise the question on SIG Node channel, like worst case tomorrow, and worst case tomorrow the other PR will be reviewable. So, okay.
Yeah. I haven't looked at these. The two PRs are relatively new. Well, one is a little older, but the other one. My general thought is coupling the PR with the actual testing that goes with it is usually easiest. And so I don't know if either of these PRs that you have presented here like shows the EDE test that might come with it.
At the moment today, the PRs are grouped by author. So one is from me, and the other is from Alexei from Huawei, which I'm not sure is on the call, but still. So you see, the reason I'm asking is making just one PR makes harder because there are two authors involved. So again, but if you prefer this way, we can totally sort it out somehow.
Yeah, and the only other reason I alluded to Renaud was he was doing work in the same release in the same area that I also don't have fresh in my cache, if that's all merged yet or not. I don't know if David Ashpole knows or not if he's here today. And so just making sure we didn't conflict in the graduation of this feature with adding the enhancement. It'd be good if you could just pair up with Renaud on figuring out the right path.
Okay, I will talk with him. Okay, no problem.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, we're making good progress here. So Sergey, I think you're next on the.
Yeah. So one is a low priority. I never deprecated APIs in Kubernetes, and this is something I fished out of almost rotten PRs. Somebody suggested to remove pod unknown state, and initial PR was just marking this state as deprecated, and it totally makes sense. Nobody said the state. I extended it and removed all the mentions of pod unknown. So now one question that was mentioned in original PR, how we prevent people from setting pod unknown going forward. And I mean, I was thinking to include some panic in the code, but then I said like maybe it's too harsh. So I'm just curious, what do you think about it? And is there some guidance how to proceed with that? We can survive, like we can just keep pod unknown for a while. I just don't see a reason to keep this dead code.
So Seth and Ryan and Renaud and myself and David Eads have been chasing down interesting edge cases for pod phase reporting that we've been seeing in our own EDE suites. And Seth, my memory's bad, but the area we were hitting pod unknown potentially I thought was related to if the node had been drained and the container no longer existed, but the node had been, or the pod had never been drained. So it was a daemon set, and the host was restarted, but the container record never remained. I thought we had an issue here around also continuing to report pod unknown phase. But the changes I think we merged this past week had them all reporting container terminated. But am I mixing topics?
So we never set pod phase unknown. We just prevent, so like the kubelet can get in a situation where if the container doesn't exist in the runtime anymore, it's pretty hard for the kubelet to determine whether whether the container in the pod has never run or whether it ran, terminated, and got cleaned up by the runtime. And so we just set the last terminated field so that the phase the phase detection logic in the kubelet works properly. So it basically set the tombstone in the status so that it knows that it either, that it's in a terminal that the container has run in the past. But we never set pod phase unknown.
Okay, originally it had the phase set unknown, and majority of things, I believe still today production may still have that. The initial majority is Fortnite audio is working on. So Kubernetes in there's the network partition and node controller. Haven't heard the Kubernetes send the status long enough, 5 minutes, that's configurable. So at that time, we don't know if the container still running or it is not running, it is already there. So then we'll set unknown. So we fixed that problem for many different ways, but I believe still in today's product, sometimes we go back to the unknown phase.
Yes, Donna, you're referring to when the node is disconnected from the control plane, the node lifecycle controller will go and set the pod phase to, or will set the data to unknown. Did I hear that correctly? Yeah.
Yes, that's the major things. Basically, that's also by design usually why we have that unknown state, because we don't want to brutally take other items. So then we give that information to controller, like each the job controller or whatever called controller to take the action. So by design, so it's not like unless we solve all this kind of network partition issue, I don't think we may give other state, other name for the case, but we still.
Yeah, so my own history is saying the kubelet should never report unknown status, but an external agent, when the kubelet's unable to heartbeat about that pod, may report unknown status. And so I guess, Sergey, what was motivating maybe you to explore this? And then we should probably
so the motivation for original PR is that there is no code that sets the status. So, I mean, in our KK repository. So, I mean, since nobody sets the status of this phase, then like, why would we keep it?
Yeah, so I think that's the part I personally need to go back, and the node lifecycle controller is a very complicated piece of code to be reviewing. So for my own re-education, I'd want to go back and see if anything had lingered there. And the code in there had changed when it went to taint-based evictions versus the prior behavior. And so it could be that there used to be something being set that got removed, and probably just getting a document that enumerated the history of this phase is probably the first thing that would be helpful for us. Because I'm also potentially mixing in my head that the node status is what goes unknown, not just the pod phase. And so getting that written down is probably the best thing we could do right now.
Okay, so I can try to help with this review as well, try to dig into history. But I mean, if you can do that as well, it will be great. If not, I will try to put as many details as possible on the PR. But it's low priority. I don't think we need to rush with that.
Yeah, even Dawn, I'm thinking out loud here, it's the node status that goes unknown because there hasn't been a heartbeat. And I don't recall if we ever did link that unknown status to the pod status. So yeah, we have to investigate the right thing. And then I'm also curious if other satellite projects like Virtual Kubelet are ever setting this phase. But that's maybe a separate exercise we could explore. I don't know if anybody's on the call is aware of what Virtual Kubelet may do with respect to unknown phase. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So next item is, since we have time, I writing this PR on promoting runtime class to GA. So disabling feature flag is easy. One thing that I want to also do is promote V1 beta 1 into V1 API. And part of it is field pod overhead also goes in the same folder because it's really hard to detach this field out of runtime class. So now there is a V1 API, like Node API, and there is a pod overhead field inside it. And I was wondering how bad it is and if there are any better practice to do that, or it's just fine to have beta field in V1 API.
Tim, are you here today? You want to also talk on this, or? I don't know if Tim, is Tim Auclair here? I'm going through the list. No, okay.
Is there was there discussion on making pod overhead GA as well? Or is that kind of further down the road?
I think we discussed it and said that it's a lower priority than GA and runtime class.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to do both. I think they both are used quite widely.
It's my naive approach to trying to solve the problem you have.
I guess we can measure risk, but like I don't see a reason why we would treat this any different than when we add a new field to any existing V1 API. And so like my first reaction is there's not a problem here as long as in validation code we protect writing to that field if and only if the overhead feature gate is enabled. But I don't think that the presence of that field should block the promotion of runtime class generally. So I think I don't think you need to couple the two, Sergey, and it should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
We never followed up on who wants to take a review on this work with you, Sergey, and so was it Tim who was going to help with you, or do we want to have any other volunteers to help shepherd review? I don't know, Eric, if you would like to assist, or anybody in the community who wants to chime in to help review Sergey's PR.
Yeah, I'm happy to review it.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think that's everything on today's agenda. So we're relatively prompt. Before we adjourn, are there other topics that people wanted to raise today?
I wanted to ask, do we want to start using triage tag or label on the GitHub? Because all the PRs and issues now marked as untriaged, and I wonder if you want to start using it and like actively participate in that, or just like ignore it.
I'm open to everyone's perspective on if that helps or not. I'm not adverse to trying that out. So I guess Seth or Kevin or Dawn or any of the other approvers or active reviewers we have today on the call, if we think that'd be helpful, I think that's fine. I think probably many of us just use Kubernetes to figure out what is the area that we'll go hit on any given moment, but we could probably be more effective.
Yeah, I haven't started using triage, but I could try it and see how the workflow is.
think triage will be most useful in issues rather than PRs. So that might be good use of triage variable.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about this generally. We should probably think about, Sergey, if you wanted to help shepherd this, if we wanted to have a more dedicated issue triage process, that we actually say if we use it, that there'll be a recurring set of individuals who are actually doing it. And that probably is like figuring out what the right cadence is to run that triage and drawing attention to it. So we can follow up with that asynchronously, but if we think that there's a sufficient community of volunteers to help on that, I think we would all be appreciative of that effort. And so I think it's only going to work if the other 30 plus participants on the call can help make it successful.
Yeah, I think what triage label may help is, and I want your feedback on whether it's actual problem. We want to make sure that issues being looked at, and we have some decision on every issue, like whether we're pursuing it or like we are okay for somebody to pursue it. So I was thinking we can start using triage label there. I don't think it's very useful for PRs, but it may be. What is your perspective? What problem do you want to address?
I mean, I'd like to get our backlog for known work down before maybe the unknown work. I mean, it's very common that a new issue appears at the same time that the PR is created, and so you're kind of doubling the triage when one PR says, "I just fixed this issue that's of equal age." But I think the key thing here is that we can find sufficient bandwidth and sufficient volunteers to make the process effective. And so if we want to push that, let's try to see if we can get volunteers to do that. I don't know, Dims, I see you on the call. I know I've talked to Lori a little bit about this in past interactions, but I view this as like, how do we scale folks rather than asking how to more time slice an existing set of small folks. So, and it's only effective if we run in particularly like triage meetings. And so knowing who and how often we can participate in those is kind of the next step.
Right. I think we might want to experiment with a smaller set of people doing triages more frequently. Let me think about it. Let's follow up on Slack. I'll see if I can block like 30 minutes every week to do that. That might be a good start, I think.
Yeah.
We might not need all the approvers there, but we need sufficient people, sufficient eyeballs. It will only work if there's a good crew that's consistently participating over time.
All right, excellent. So thanks for everyone who engaged today and then drew attention to items that we can try to unblock. And we will meet again next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.